Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Links are in the description below. Please show some love of the author and me. On to the show. Of course, there would be chapels in some smaller places, like towns and villages, which were generally managed by priests. Generally speaking, as long as one performed his job well, he'd be promoted accordingly. However, in the Brilliant Shrine, it was impossible for an individual to be incompetent. No matter how well a priest did, he'd never be promoted beyond the level of a bishop if his abilities could not reach the mark. In fact, he might forever remain a priest in a chapel. This might seem unreasonable, but it was rather fair in the Brilliant Shrine because the way that the religious professions enhanced their strength was different from others before reaching the legendary level. There was no need for them to meditate and accumulate mana or train their body to a certain level. They simply had to believe in their faith firmly, and their power would increase steadily. Hence, in the Brilliant Shrine, strength and status were considerably related more often than not. Pope Rosario was a powerhouse of a sanctuary realm, and that was a fact that everyone in Amril knew about. No one dared to question the faith of the Pope. The 4 archbishops were all around level 23 and level 24, and were near the sanctuary realm. The Court of Heresy and the Holy Paladins were the strongest forces under Pope Rosario. Among them, there were also a few legendary powerhouses. The strength of the Judge of Heresy and the Holy Paladins was not weaker than the 4 archbishops. A cardinal was also in charge of the great parish, and if he weren't of a certain level, he wouldn't be able to convince the people to acknowledge him. Even the bishops of the cathedrals in each city had to have at least level 15 strength in order to exhibit the greatness and sacredness of the holy light to the believers. Jaikar was just an ordinary priest of the Darkness Shrine, and if he were in the Brilliant Shrine, he would be considered to be on the level of a bishop. In terms of strength, he had also just reached level 16, and he seemed to be extremely far away from the legendary level. Hence, he couldn't be compared to Archbishop Martin at all. Seeing that the person who came from the Darkness Shrine was not Sendros, Archbishop lost interest, and instead bade goodbye to Lin Li and asked another mage to take him around the Tower of Dusk. After Archbishop Martin left, Lin Li motioned for Jaikar to take a seat. He then asked, "Why did Master Sendros send you?" Jaikar's face eased up a little, and he finally remembered that he hadn't finished speaking just now. Hence, he frantically and apologetically said, "President Felik, the high priest can't make it here, because he's tied up with something, so he has sent me to invite you back with me to the Darkness Shrine as soon as possible." However, he didn't mention any reason, and he simply told me that it's something very important. Something very important? Lin Li could not help but secretly contemplate. Although he didn't have much contact with Sendros, the latter had indeed helped him a lot. The design sketch of the Black Front Fortress was given to him by Sendros, who also gave him the precious Heart of the Fallen, which allowed his humorous Wyrm to obtain sentience. Hence, he couldn't turn down Sendros, especially since it was something important. However, the messenger Jaikar did not mention explicitly how important the matter was, hence, there was no way for Lin Li to deduce it. If he were to go to the Darkness Shrine, it would take him just 3 to 5 days, or 10 in total. He was confident of rushing to the Brilliant Shrine in time to give Rosario the antidote. However, if it were like exploring the Sky Castle and Osric's mausoleum, it would take him about 2 to 6 months, which was too long for Rosario. If Rosario were to suffer another relapse, even a deity wouldn't be able to save him. After weighing the pros and cons again and again, Lin Li decided to go to the Brilliant Shrine first. After all, he still had a rough idea of how long it would take him. As for the Darkness Shrine, Sendros didn't tell him in detail what the important thing was, nor did he mention any deadlines. Hence, Lin Li reckoned that it shouldn't be too urgent. Otherwise, the Darkness Shrine wouldn't have sent just a level 16 priest. After all, a legendary mage would have been able to arrive faster by flight. Hence, Lin Li had no choice but to apologetically say to Jaikar, "It's unfortunate that Archbishop Martin has also come to invite me to the Brilliant Shrine to save someone's life. Hence, I can't delay it. Please tell Master Sendros that I'll rush to the Darkness Shrine immediately after I'm done handling the matter at the Brilliant Shrine." Of course, Lin Li couldn't say that he was going to give Rosario an antidote. However, Sandros also knew about it. When he heard that Lin Li was going to the Brilliant Shrine to save a life, he'd definitely think of the poison in Rosario's body. Well, when Jiker saw the Archbishop Martin, he actually had a hunch that his task might not be completed. If it had been someone else, he would have long flared up and hit them. Although the Darkness Shrine was now down and out, they were still one of the three most powerful forces of Anril. However, he had not forgotten that the High Priest Sandros had already warned him not to be rude to Lin Li. Jiker really couldn't understand why Sandros respected Lin Li so greatly. Even though he might be young and talented, and had already become a president at a young age, that didn't warrant such serious treatment from Sandros. He thought, Archbishop Martin from the Brilliant Shrine actually looked for him too. Who was this Felix exactly? Seeing that Lin Li had already made up his mind, Jiker felt that there was nothing much he could say. After all, his task was to invite Lin Li over to the Darkness Shrine, and not kidnap him. Hence, he had no choice but to inform Lin Li of the route that he could take to the Darkness Shrine before getting up to leave while pondering anxiously how he should answer to the Great Priest. After Lin Li sent away Jiker away, he explained to Gavin what he should do after he left. Apart from the formulation of the 2,000 potions, he also wanted Angelano to provide the materials for making the alchemy puppets and alchemy colossus. Angelano was a true guru-level alchemist, and even specialized in making alchemy machines. Coupled with the knowledge learned from Osric's journal, he was definitely at the pinnacle. Although Lin Li was also an alchemist, he was an orthodox one, and mainly specialized in the field of alchemy arrays. In terms of making alchemy colossus, he couldn't compare to Angelano at all. Although Angelano was originally the type to take advantage as much as he could, he was rather afraid of Lin Li's brutal means. Besides, he was also grateful to Lin Li for giving him the opportunity to read Osric's journal. Thirdly, he also couldn't bear to give up Balak's magical crystal that Lin Li had promised to give him. Hence, he willingly stayed in the Tower of Dusk to help. After turning the 12 Death Knights into Holy Death Knights, he began to make alchemy colossuses and alchemy puppets. The most important thing was still the lack of weapons above the Eternal Furnace. Lin Li did not obtain all 12 magic lamps, and thus could only use simple and efficient magical crystal cannons to make up for it. Compared to the magical weapons created by Osric, magical crystal cannons were rather simple, and the highly compressed mana from cannons indeed contained great power. If Lin Li could install hundreds of magical crystal cannons on the Eternal Furnace, even the powerhouses of the Sanctuary Realm would probably have to retreat in hopelessness. Hence, another part of Lin Li's instructions was to get Gavin to continue sending people to the Dwarf Kingdom to purchase magical crystal cannons without limit. Although the Tower of Dusk currently had 30 magical crystal cannons, Lin Li felt that there wasn't enough, especially since he had seen the hundreds of magical crystal cannons in Osric's mausoleum. Of course, although Lin Li asked for an unlimited amount of crystal cannons, it would be difficult for the Dwarf Kingdom to fulfill the order within a short time given their manufacturing capacity. After Lin Li arranged everything, Archbishop Martin had also finished exploring the Tower of Dusk. Without any further discussion, the two immediately set off for the Brilliant Shrine. Lin Li did not bring anyone with him, since he was just going to give Pope Rosario the antidote, and not embarking on a dangerous expedition. Besides, most of his servants were undead creatures, and even if Pope Rosario didn't mind them, the strong holy aura was bad for them. Meanwhile, if Lin Li really dared to take the 12 Holy Death Knights with him to the Brilliant Shrine, it would be a huge insult to them, and even Rosario would be infuriated. The Leaden Kingdom was known as the Holy Kingdom of the Holy Light. From the royals to the lowly civilians, most of the people were loyal faithful of the Brilliant Shrine. There were countless churches in Leaden Kingdom, and even in a small village with only a dozen households there would definitely be a church that was taller and cleaner than the surrounding buildings. The holy professions were the most respected ones in the nation, and no noble would dare to offend even the priest of a small church in a small village. Located in the heart of the Leaden Kingdom near the capital, Delano City, which was also known as City of Dawn, was the holy ground to the believers in Anril. Although it was only a few hundred square kilometers in size, and did not seem to be a prosperous city, it was a true country within a country. In the hearts of the believers, it was the true center of Amril. The city of Delano was built on a mountain, and the tall, majestic stone walls that were clean and flawless made the city seem like it was emitting holy rays of light every single moment. In the middle of Delano City, there was an ordinary-looking mountain. It was not steep, and similar ones were rather commonly found in Amril. However, in the hearts of the believers of the Holy Light, the mountain was on a pedestal because the entire Leaden Kingdom was built on the mountain, together with the most solemn and sacred church in Amril, the Church of Dawn. Although the Leaden Kingdom and the Felon Kingdom bordered each other, and the breezy plains was situated along their borders, the journey from the Tower of Dusk to Delano City was rather long. Fortunately, Lin Li and Archbishop Martin were both experienced legendary powerhouses. Hence, they flew continuously and managed to see the White Sacred City within less than a day. President Felix, that's the Sacred City, Delano. I'm sorry that no one can receive us, because this matter has to be kept confidential, said Archbishop Martin, who had been appearing rather apologetic ever since he left the Tower of Dusk with Lin Li. After all, he was asking Lin Li for help, yet his invitation seemed to lack sincerity. Now that they were in Delano City, there was no one to receive them or greet Lin Li, thus making Martin look even more apologetic. If it weren't for the issue of confidentiality, it would be no exaggeration to make all the holy paladins escort them to the Dawn Cathedral. However, Lin Li did not care about this. Instead, he smilingly said, Archbishop Martin, you're reading too much into this. I know what this means to the Brilliant Shrine. It just so happens that I don't like those troublesome formalities, either. We'd better hurry up and save His Holiness. Although Lin Li was a figure of status in Amril now, he wasn't too particular about the formalities and etiquette. He felt that true respect was not reflected by how solemn the formalities were. There were some people who were there to receive them, actually. Lin Li and Archbishop Martin slowly landed in the square at the foot of the mountain, to see that there was a female paladin with blonde hair and dressed in silver armor standing in front of the long steps leading to the Dawn Cathedral. She appeared rather solemn, and when she saw the two of them, she immediately rushed forward to greet them. She first saluted Archbishop Martin before looking at Lin Li with a slightly complicated look. Hello, Mage Felix. Oh, Miss Rena, we haven't seen each other for a long time, Lin Li said with a smile. The blonde female paladin was the same one he'd met back in the breezy plains. She was the only judge paladin of the Brilliant Shrine. Although Lin Li had had a conflict with Paladin Rena during the banquet in the Castellan mansion of Roland City, because he'd been accompanied by his vampire servant Norfeller, the two of them fought side by side in the Scar of Death. Although Rena didn't approve of the way Lin Li handled things, she no longer tried to purify him every now and then like she used to in the beginning. It was a good choice for Rena to receive them. Although she would attract plenty of attention everywhere she went because of her identity as a judge paladin and her outstanding appearance, no one would think of the Pope. At the same time, it wouldn't seem disrespectful towards Lin Li. Archbishop Martin went the extra mile to inform the Pope and other insiders about the arrival of Lin Li to prepare for the detoxification process. After all, it was a place that was considered sacred in the hearts of all believers of the Holy Light. If it did not concern the existence of Holy Light, no one would be allowed to fly there freely regardless of their status. Hence, Lin Li had no choice but to slowly walk along the long stairs and make his way to the Dawn Cathedral at the peak of the mountain under Rena's lead. Lin Li didn't hold it against her, since he had already arrived at the Brilliant Shrine, and Pope Rosario had also suppressed the toxins within his body. Hence, the latter didn't require the antidote immediately. Not to mention, Lin Li was enjoying the company of a beautiful woman. And thus climbing the stairs while enjoying the scenery was also a rare luxury that he rarely could enjoy. However, as Rena walked all the way to the peak of the mountain, Lin Li also realized that there seemed to be lots of people staring at them while he was enjoying the surrounding scenery. Of course, they were all looking at him with awe, admiration, jealousy, and envy. Lin Li glanced at Rena, who was beside him. She was the proud disciple of Archbishop Unlos and the only judge paladin of the Brilliant Shrine. While possessing incredible status and strength, she was also a rare beauty. Lin Li obviously understood the reason for those glances that were being shot at him. Clearly, this judge paladin of the brilliant shrine was the lover of everyone's dreams, and her admirers would obviously be jealous to see her walking up the mountain with a stranger mage, even if they were believers of the holy light who had strong faith in their religion. Finally, under the leadership of Rina, Lin Li arrived at the door of the Dawn Cathedral on top of the mountain. The majestic and solemn Dawn Cathedral, which was also the holy ground in the eyes of all the believers of holy light, was exuding an intense holy aura that seemed to be able to purify all evil and filth of the world. In the small square in front of the Dawn Cathedral, Archbishop Martin and Archbishop Unlos were waiting together with a few higher-ups of the brilliant shrine whom Lin Li had never met before. That was where Pope Rosario lived, and apart from a few archbishops and some higher-ups, no one could really go there. Hence, there was no need to be worried about arousing suspicion. Master Felix, I didn't expect you to arrive so soon. I'm sorry I didn't go down to receive you, Unlos greeted with a smile. Although he was much older than Lin Li, he was extremely in awe of and respectful towards Lin Li due to the latter's attainments in pharmaceutics. Unlos was an archbishop of the brilliant shrine was second only to the Pope, and yet he actually addressed Lin Li as master. If there had been anyone else around, they would have definitely thought that either they had gone mad and heard wrongly or that Unlos had gone crazy. However, at this moment, neither Archbishop Martin nor Rina, who brought Lin Li there, felt that there was anything wrong with it. If it had been in the past, Rina would have probably found it hard to understand because of the huge difference in age, status, and strength. Why did her teacher have to be so polite to a young mage? However, her mindset was different now. Although she had yet to step into the legendary realm, she felt that Lin Li's aura was not inferior to that of her teacher Unlos. Regardless of his knowledge in pharmaceutics, she felt that Lin Li definitely deserved to be addressed as a master because of his personal abilities. Unlos introduced Lin Li to several other big shots of the brilliant shrine, namely, the Chief Judge Ferger, the head of the Paladins, Hollises, the Archbishop Domingo, and a few cardinals. They were all aware of Pope Rosario's poisoning, and thus they could not hide their anxiety at all. Even though they had already met Lin Li, who claimed to be able to get rid of the poison, they did not feel any less worried. After a few simple conversations, Lin Li followed the crowd into the Dawn Cathedral, and arrived in front of Pope Rosario's room with them. Some of them stopped in their tracks, while Lin Li was ushered in by Unlos. It was slightly different from what Lin Li had imagined. At this moment, Pope Rosario of the Brilliant Shrine didn't seem as feeble as the sick did, even though he had just suffered a huge relapse. Instead, his face was rather rosy, and he seemed just like a kind old man in his 50s. Your Holiness, this is the president of the Breezy Plains Guild of Magic, Master Felix, Unlos introduced after saluting respectfully. Oh. Rosario glanced at Lin Li gently, and there was a tinge of admiration in his indifferent gaze. He then nodded slightly, and said, Mage Felix, you're really a young and promising talent. It's no wonder that the Tower of Dusk has managed to develop so rapidly. Unlos is in awe of your attainments in pharmaceutics, and he hopes that you will dissolve the viper's poison in my body. If you have any requests, feel free to let me know. Although Rosario was the Pope of the Brilliant Shrine, and held a high status that no one in Anril could rival, he didn't seem to be putting on any airs when speaking to Lin Li at this moment, and his words were also simple and straightforward as if he were just having a casual chat with his junior. He didn't beat around the bush like most higher-ups did either. Rosario's attitude made Lin Li feel good about him. After all, this matter was an agreement that they had made previously, and neither of them was requesting a favor from the other party. Regardless of their attitude, the agreement would definitely be fulfilled. Besides, no matter how high Lin Li was standing, the Brilliant Shrine was still a massive entity that Lin Li looked up to, and it would be normal for them to even be arrogant. Since he was just fulfilling an agreement, he wouldn't hold it against them either. Don't worry, Your Holiness, please rest assured that I am certain about this since I've gained some experience in the Higa mountain range. However, for safety reasons, I also need to know some details from you. That would make it easier for me to make a more accurate judgment when giving you the antidote. As Rosario's attitude left Lin Li with no intentions to reap any benefits, he simply expressed his confidence. After making some detailed inquiries, Lin Li also had a clearer understanding of Rosario's physical condition and the viper's poison that had been in his body for so many years. The viper's poison was rather cunning, and if the antidote failed this time, Lin Li would probably no longer be able to come up with other effective antidotes. Hence, for the sake of making sure that there were no mistakes, Lin Li did not immediately start the detoxification, and instead told Rosario and Inglos that he needed more time to come up with a perfect plan. After all, Lin Li and Archbishop Martin had flown all the way there without stopping to take a break. Although Lin Li wasn't exhausted at all with his current power, and he didn't need to draft any plans at all, Rosario definitely wouldn't let him start the detoxification immediately out of courtesy. Anyway, the poison had already been bothering him for numerous years, and he couldn't care about waiting 1 or 2 more days. Hence, after finishing the conversation, he asked Inglos to take Lin Li to the resting area. As soon as Lin Li and Inglos walked out of the room, the big shots of the Brilliant Shrine waiting outside immediately surrounded them. In the Brilliant Shrine, Pope Rosario was put on a pedestal, and if anything were to happen to him, it would be akin to the collapse of the Brilliant Shrine. Although they did not directly ask if Lin Li could make the cut or not, it was obvious that that was what they meant as their intentions showed in their gazes. Okay, everyone, stop crowding around. Master Felix still needs to formulate a specific plan for the detoxification process. His Holiness has told me to arrange for Master Felix to get some rest. What are you guys doing by blocking the way here? Said Inglos, who was feeling extremely agitated, though he remained composed on the surface. Although Inglos did not explicitly mention if Lin Li could make the cut, the fact that the latter was going to draw up a plan for detoxification meant that there was still some hope. When everyone heard his words, there was immense joy on their faces, but of course, they also felt rather worried. After all, the safety of the Pope was extremely important for the Brilliant Shrine, and they couldn't afford to make any mistakes. Lin Li followed Inglos to the resting room, which was not in the Dawn Cathedral, but in a building located below near the cathedral. It was allegedly the place where the king of the Leaden Kingdom stayed when he came to see the Pope. Although Inglos wanted to ask Lin Li for some pointers about pharmaceutics, he knew that it wasn't the time to do so now. Hence, he left after arranging everything. Rest was optional for Lin Li. Although he had used his power of flight to fly all the way here, the depletion of energy was nothing to a legendary mage like him. Hence, after Lin Li sent Inglos back to the room, he immediately began to think of the plan to give the Pope the antidote. He didn't want to spend too much time there, and wanted to fulfill the agreement as soon as possible so that he could go to the Darkness Shrine sooner. He knew that although the messenger Jiker didn't mention in detail what the matter was, it was definitely important because Jiker said so. When he asked Rosario about the details, Lin Li had in fact already formed a plan in his head, but he felt that he had to perfect it before execution. In Lin Li's opinion, the first thing he had to do was to let Rosario nurse his body, not back to health, but make it worse through some means. Rosario's biggest problem now was that his physical state was too good for the detoxification. After all, he was a powerhouse of the sanctuary realm, and his body did not break down much even though he had been tortured by the viper's poison for so many years. That could also be because of his sanctuary power. If it had been another type of toxin, it would probably have been completely eliminated by such a strong body, but for the viper's poison, a good body didn't seem to be a good thing, because it would only make the viper's poison become more obscure and cautious. Hence, it would be less likely to take the bait. It was just like during a war between two armies, it would naturally be impossible for the weaker party to fight head-on with the stronger party. If the stronger party threw a bait and tried to lure the weaker party, the latter would definitely be extremely cautious when facing the bait. Therefore, the first thing to do would be to pretend to be weak so as to make the enemy think that you were about as strong as them. Otherwise, the only option left would be to wait for the weaker party to continue accumulating power in the dark until there was a reversal in strength disparity of both parties. Hence, the first step of the detoxification plan would be to show the viper's poison the Pope's weakness by genuinely weakening his body. Anyway, The antidote used in the end would be Lin Li's targeted detoxification potion, and not Rosario's own power and body. However, making Rosario's health debilitate was also a significant issue to consider. Rosario was a powerhouse of the sanctuary realm who was resistant to ordinary toxins and curses. Blood of the hellhound's heart, blood-stained grass, crow's tongue, flower of resentment. Los muttered, unable to believe his eyes when he saw the list from Lin Li. Every ingredient on the list was filthy and evil. Although there were plenty of precious herbs in the treasure vault of the Brilliant Shrine, they did not have any of those filthy herbs, and based on the names alone, Los could tell that they were disgusting ingredients that did not seem to be meant for antidotes. I'm going to formulate a demonic curse potion, Lin Li said, calmly. What? Inglo's hands trembled, and he almost threw the entire list onto the ground. He raised his head to look at Lin Li before asking, Master Felix, are these used for His Holiness's detoxification? Los was the best pharmaceutics master in the entire Leaden Kingdom and Brilliant Shrine. Although he wouldn't prepare those evil and filthy poisons, he had sufficiently profound knowledge in pharmaceutics to know that the demonic curse was a deadly poison. He knew that it was probably not inferior to the viper's poison in Pope Rosario's body. Yes. I need to use this demonic curse to weaken His Holiness's body quickly so that I can get rid of the poison easily, said Lin Li, who felt rather helpless. He had yet to begin the treatment, yet he already had to give Pope Rosario some poison. Had he not known the nature of the viper's poison, he would probably not have believed in this method. The main effects of the demonic curse were to weaken the user's body and make their body functions decline rapidly. Once the body was about to decay, the power in their body would naturally decline. That was exactly what Lin Li wanted. Well, Master Felix, it's not that I don't believe you, it's just that it's not up to me to decide this on my own. If you don't mind, could you please explain it to me in detail? Los knew that Lin Li definitely wasn't out to poison the Pope, but him believing Lin Li wasn't sufficient, and Lin Li had to earn the trust of others. Lin Li did not intend to hide his plan. Hence, he immediately told Los everything he planned to do. He knew that if he couldn't even persuade Los, who had a deep knowledge of pharmaceutics, he probably wouldn't be able to convince the rest who did not understand pharmaceutics to let him feed the poison to the Pope. Actually, even if it were just a filthy item, and not a deadly poison, they wouldn't allow Lin Li to feed it to the Pope either. Given the Pope's abilities, it's definitely a piece of cake for him to deal with the demonic curse, which is a lethal poison to others. However, to those who have holy light, the poison could easily be purified, said Lin Li, who revealed his plan without constraint. Los knew that Lin Li was telling the truth. Although the demonic curse was deadly and vicious, its greatest weakness was that it could be easily purified by holy light. That was definitely a weakness of most curses. However, he still felt uncomfortable about letting the Pope take such a filthy thing. Indeed, as Los predicted, everyone opposed it unanimously when Los told everyone of that matter. In their opinion, only a healthy body could withstand the torment from the poison, yet they now had to use those filthy things to weaken the Pope's body? This was like plain murder to them. I disagree, this is simply murder. Los, he may be a learned pharmacist who has high standards, but this method of detoxification is unheard of. We can't gamble with His Holiness's life. Besides, I've also heard that this mage Felix has undead creatures for servants. I really doubt his sincerity to give His Holiness an antidote. Halyard immediately raised his objection while glowering at Lin Li, who was beside Los. He seemed to be all ready to attack once he spotted any flaw. The captain of the Holy Paladins, Halyard, did dabble in pharmaceutics, and his opinion obviously affected those who did not understand pharmacy. The chief judge of the Court of Heresy and a few cardinals had also expressed doubts about Lin Li's plans at this moment. They even asked to verify Lin Li's identity. Besides, the fact that Lin Li always brought his two undead servants around was obviously an important reason for everyone to hesitate in giving their approval. Although Lin Li did not bring any of his undead servants with him this time, it was no secret in the Breezy Plains. The Breezy Plains was not within the control of the Brilliant Shrine, hence, no one would hold it against him for having undead servants there. However, the fact that a person who was constantly dealing with undead creatures actually proposed such a dangerous plan that seemed to be completely incomprehensible was indeed rather suspicious. However, no matter what their opinions were, the final decision still lay with Pope Rosario. After hearing Lin Li's detailed explanation, Pope Rosario decided to go with it resolutely, despite the unanimous opposition of everyone else and his lack of knowledge in pharmaceutics. The Brilliant Shrine would never allow those filthy things to exist, and now that Lin Li wanted them to find those items and put them together in a short period of time, it was truly a tall order. Fortunately, the Chief Judge Furger thought of a way to directly interrogate necromancers who had been imprisoned by them and ask for those items. Hence, he managed to get everything within just 3 days. Lin Li stood in front of the operating table and lit up a light blue magical flame in the pharmaceutical flame before turning it to the maximum again. There would sometimes be magical rays of light and 933. Sometimes some charred smoke coming from the vessel that contained the potion. As Lin Li's lab that Los usually used. The blood of the hellhound's heart was gradually brought to a boil in the refining vessel, and the horrendous stench of the fumes made everyone feel queasy. Archbishop Los, Archbishop Martin, Holliard, the head of the Holy Paladins, and the Judge Paladin Rena, all of who were interested in pharmaceutics, tried their best to bear with the stench as they watched Lin Li prepare the potion. Lin Li constantly added the ingredients into the vessel, and would occasionally turn down the magic flame before turning it to the maximum again. There would sometimes be magical rays of light and sometimes some charred smoke coming from the vessel that contained the potion. As Lin Li's actions were smooth and fluid, they gradually made everyone forget the stench that wafted up to their noses. He was completely immersed in the process of preparing the medicine. Thud. With a dull popping sound, the stench in the pharmaceutical lab suddenly dissipated, and was soon replaced by an alluring fragrance that seemed to be the most wonderful scent in the world that made them take a deep breath. However, when they recalled the source of the fragrance, they immediately turned red. No one had expected that the nauseating herbs would give off such a pleasant scent. Lin Li carefully poured the magic potion that he had prepared into the potion bottle, after which he picked it up and shook it slightly while placing it against the light source. Through the crystal potion bottle, everyone could see its color radiating with a brilliant and vibrant halo. Indeed, dangerous things are always full of temptations. Rena exclaimed, unable to contain her feelings. At this moment, the higher-ups of the Brilliant Shrine who were passionate about pharmaceutics were looking at Lin Li with admiration and excitement in their gazes. Although the demonic curse was the most evil and filthy poison, it was also a genuine guru-level potion. After watching the process of Lin Li preparing the potion, they felt that they had learned a lot, and at the same time they also realized how drastic the difference between their own pharmaceutical knowledge and Lin Li's was. It was no longer just a difference in technique and knowledge, but a difference in realm. At this moment, the young mage Lin Li was just like an idol in the eyes of those several people. After receiving the potion, Pope looked at it and felt amazed when he smelled the enticing fragrance. Although he'd agreed to go ahead with Lin Li's treatment plan, Rosario still felt uneasy about downing a potion that contained so many filthy ingredients. However, the potion now looked far from filthy, and if he didn't think about how it was formulated, he wouldn't find it difficult to accept. According to Lin Li's explanation, the demonic curse potion would make Rosario's holy light be suppressed within his body to allow the demonic curse to take effect fully without restraint. Within just 2 days, Rosario's image changed greatly as his blonde hair became gray and white, and his face turned as pale as a sheet while being covered in wrinkles. His strong body seemed to have shriveled, and he was just like a lich, giving out intense death aura. Seeing the physical changes of the Pope, everyone tensed up immediately, and they all began asking Lin Li when he would start the detoxification. Frankly speaking, all of them were feeling a little regretful at this moment for not opposing it firmly. Los and the rest were no longer in the mood to ask Lin Li for some tips in pharmaceutics, and they were instead focusing all of their attention on Pope Rosario. They even wished they could immediately use their purge spell to stop the curse from taking a toll on Rosario's body. Finally, when Lin Li arrived before Rosario's bed again, he sat on the chair next to him and took out 2 potions instead of leaving. Compared to the colorful demonic curse potion, those two were too inconspicuous. One of them was in the form of a green liquid, while the other seemed similar to black ink. Master Felix, can you begin now? Unlos and the rest looked at Lin Li with hope in their gazes, waiting for Lin Li to answer. Help His Holiness up and let him take this potion first. It's the gift of the Earth Goddess and the bait that we're going to use, Lin Li instructed, motioning for Unlos to help Rosario up while his body was decaying. He then walked over with the green potion. The gift of the Earth Goddess. Isn't that a guru level? Almost everyone could not help but exclaim and gasp in shock. Although Lin Li had prepared the guru-level demonic curse potion in front of them, they were still astonished by the gift of the Earth Goddess. There were still differences between different guru-level potions. To them, the gift of the Earth Goddess was closer to the Divine Smith level than the demonic curse. After Lin Li pulled out the cork of the potion bottle, a fresh and natural aura of life filled the room. Everyone felt extremely energized, and it was as if the mere whiff of that scent made their bodies grow stronger greatly. In the end, Rosario was a powerhouse of the sanctuary realm, and although he had allowed the demonic curse to wreak havoc in his body for 2 days, causing his body to turn into a horrible state, he was still somewhat conscious. Even though the demonic curse was maniacal and tormented Rosario greatly, he could instantly purify the curse in his body with a mere thought. When he slowly poured the potion into his mouth, he could still swallow the potion without the help of others. When he finished the gift of the Earth Goddess, Rosario's decaying body immediately exuded a gust of aura of life, but he frowned again soon after. Clearly, the viper's poison had finally broken out and exploded within his body. Everyone could clearly feel that the vitality in his body was continuously flowing out, and it was as if there was a menacing beast that was continuously consuming the vitality in it. At this moment, Lin Li grabbed the ink-like potion again, and pulled out the cork of the bottle, after which the nauseating stench filled the room again. The rest even thought that he had taken out the wrong potion, but Lin Li did not hesitate, and simply placed it directly on Rosario's lips before pouring it slowly into his mouth. At this moment, everyone was paying attention to the changes in Pope Rosario nervously. They all knew that if the antidote was not effective, nothing else would be able to suppress the viper's poison, and damage would definitely be unavoidable, especially since Rosario's body was extremely weak now. Time passed second after second, and the vitality in Rosario's body began to weaken. They had no idea when it would disappear completely. His body was trembling, and he was also frowning, a clear evidence of the pain that he was going through. The battle between the viper's poison and the antidote was taking its toll on Rosario's body without restraint. After a long time, Rosario's breathing finally became more stable and rhythmic. His wrinkly face also gradually turned rosy, and a holy aura emanated from his body, making him emit a faint halo. Upon sight of this, Lin Li and the rest finally breathed a sigh of relief. It was obvious that Rosario's body was recovering quickly. It was no doubt that the poison had already been removed. Master Felix, I'm really sorry for being suspicious and doubtful of your plan. Unexpectedly, Halyard, the head of the Divine Paladins, apologized with a very sincere expression on his face. Halyard was a powerhouse who had entered the legendary realm several years ago. Hence, him apologizing to a young mage in front of everyone was absolutely unimaginable. However, after thinking about Halyard's hobbies, everyone began to realize that Halyard had to be interested in Lin Li's pharmaceutical knowledge. While apologizing to a young man might be embarrassing, apologizing to a pharmaceutics guru was very normal for someone who loved pharmaceutics. Head Halyard, I understand that you were just being concerned about the safety of His Holiness, Lin Li said while waving his arms. He had a good impression of Lin Li, who preferred pharmacy to forging. With his sanctuary power and the residual power of the gift of the Earth Goddess, Rosario's body recovered at a visible rate, and he looked shriveled up like a lich that was withering. At the same time, he also looked like dry soil that was being moistened with water as his skin began to tighten a little. There was a layer of gold luster on his gray hair, and within just a day's time, he turned back into a strong older man who looked like he was only in his 50s. The elimination of the poison in Pope Rosario's body was an event worth celebrating for the entire Brilliance Shrine. However, due to the fact that his power had not been restored to the peak, the celebration would have to be postponed. For the rest of the people in the Brilliant Shrine, they would still have to keep the matter a secret. Lin Li wasn't too bothered by that, because he had already cured Rosario. When he thought about Sendro's invitation, he got ready to bid Rosario goodbye and leave. However, although it was just fulfilling an agreement, it was rather significant to the Brilliant Shrine. How could they just let Lin Li leave like this? Rosario, in particular, suddenly proposed to cooperate with the Tower of Dusk when Lin Li bade him goodbye. Hence, Lin Li had no choice but to consider it for a few days. Of course, Rosario's proposal for a cooperation was not only because he wanted Lin Li to stay behind a while longer, but also because working with a real pharmaceutics guru would be a great benefit to the Brilliant Shrine. Another reason that was more important was that they had always been searching for the son of the Holy Light, and according to various signs, everything seemed to hint at the young mage Lin Li. However, no one dared to jump to conclusions without any concrete evidence. In case of a misunderstanding, the Brilliant Shrine would become the greatest laughingstock of Anrel. Lin Li could totally let his subordinates from the Tower of Dusk, such as Gavin and Beckley, take part in the discussion. What really made Lin Li choose to stay was that Rosario promised to let him read the classic of the Brilliant Shrine, the Light Bible. The first piece of the debris of the stars that Lin Li had obtained was Holy Light, which he had researched the most so far. However, in spite of this, he still had an inadequate understanding of the nomological power of Holy Light compared to clergy. If Rosario had the debris of the stars' Holy Light, he would definitely be able to exert more power than Lin Li, who did not have stars of fury. Hence, when Lin Li heard Rosario promise to let him read the Light Bible, he decided to seize the opportunity. Thus, Lin Li began to get busier in the next few days that he spent in the Brilliant Shrine. Unlos and his peers who were interested in pharmaceutics would occasionally consult Lin Li about questions that had troubled them for a long time. Halyard, in particular, immediately went to Lin Li and bombarded him with questions while sincerely asking him for tips and guidance. It seemed that he did not find it embarrassing at all to be asking a youngster for advice. Lin Li didn't find it troublesome either. It was not that they didn't have any foundation or background in pharmaceutics and needed him to teach them bit by bit. Hence, the questions they asked were often because they hadn't figured out some of the key points. Moreover, those who could become superiors of the Brilliant Shrine were naturally not fools. Once Lin Li gave them some pointers and prompts, they would be able to understand the issue quickly. However, the more relaxed Lin Li was in answering, the more unbelievable they found it, especially Halyard, whose pharmaceutical knowledge was the worst amongst his peers. He could at most be regarded as an intermediate pharmacist. However, pestering Lin Li for the past few days gave him shocking gains, because he actually managed to formulate an advanced potion after just a few tries. That made Halyard surprised, and at the same time, he began to admire Lin Li greatly. He even wanted to find an excuse to leave with Lin Li and stay at the Tower of Dusk for a period of time. At his current rate of progress, he believed that he would probably become a true master of pharmaceutics in no time. Although they didn't react as exaggeratedly as Halyard and Los and the rest who were already masters of pharmaceutics could clearly feel that their level in pharmacy had increased greatly after receiving Lin Li's answers. Master of pharmaceutics? They knew that they could only be considered masters now, and the thought of how they called themselves masters in the past made them feel ashamed. In addition to answering everyone's questions about pharmaceutics and reading the Light Bible, Lin Li also visited the holy mountain which Dawn Cathedral was located on together with Rena, who showed him the way. Enjoying the company of a beautiful female paladin like Rena was undoubtedly a pleasant thing. Although Lin Li had always been focusing on magic, that did not mean that he did not know how to appreciate beauties. The mountain at the back of the holy mountain was known as a forbidden land, but it was not really one. However, here were plenty of precious herbs that had light attribute. It was definitely beautiful, but if there were no restrictions, the herbs would probably be destroyed in no time. As the disciple of the head pharmacist of the Brilliant Shrine in Los, Rena naturally had special grants that allowed her to access the place freely. Hence, it became her favorite place on the entire holy mountain. However, this time, Rina didn't seem to be in a good mood, because the young mage Lin Li was following her. Of course, the problem did not lie with Lin Li. Although Rina hated the fact that Lin Li had recruited undead creatures to be his servants in the past, she began to change her opinion of him after seeing that he had personally helped Rosario remove the viper's poison. At this moment, she felt nothing but respect for him, and that was the very reason Rina decided to bring Lin Li to the place that would often cheer her up. However, there was a young man dressed in a bishop's robe who stopped in the middle of the passage, blocking their way. He was a young bishop who had curly brown hair, a handsome face, and a well-proportioned figure. He was clad in a clean white robe, and was an absolute hunk. "Bishop Siddharth, what are you doing here instead of learning from Archbishop Domingo?" Rina questioned coldly, with a slight frown. She'd initially brought Lin Li there purely with the intention of showing him around her favorite place. She wanted Lin Li to see the most beautiful scenery, in her opinion. However, she was in a foul mood because she was suddenly stopped in her tracks by someone who ruined her journey. Teacher has made a breakthrough in pharmaceutics lately, and he's been engrossed in research the past few days. "I'm here because I need some fresh herbs," Siddharth said while shifting his gaze onto Lin Li with a look of disdain and disgust. Lin Li shook his head secretly. Obviously, he had sparked some anger and displeasure within the young men in the Brilliant Shrine lately because their dream lover had become his tour guide. "Oh, have you gotten them, then? If you have, hurry and go back, don't let Archbishop Domingo wait for too long," Rina said with a look of impatience. While displeased, her manners and good upbringing allowed her to adjust her emotions quickly. "Not yet. I happened to see you here, so I decided to wait for you. Well, you know that my knowledge in pharmaceutics cannot be compared to yours. If I collect the wrong herbs, I will be reprimanded by teacher," Siddharth said as he scratched his head embarrassedly. As if he had suddenly discovered Lin Li's presence, he then asked Rina, "Rina, is this your friend? Why don't you introduce us to each other?" "This is President Felix from the Tower of Dusk, and I'm showing him around here," Rina explained, trying her best not to flare up. "Mage Felix? I think I heard of you somewhere," said Siddharth, who acted like he tried hard to recall something. All of a sudden, he looked up at Lin Li in surprise, and exclaimed, "Wait, you're that mage who likes using filthy undead creatures as your servants?" As Siddharth yelled, the other clergyman nearby hurriedly turned to look at Lin Li with unconcealed disdain and contempt. For the believers of the Holy Light, the mages who were labeled as blasphemers were already extremely unpopular. What more a mage who was often in close contact with filthy undead creatures? That made him no different from necromancers, and they absolutely detested them. Siddharth had a good mindset. Rina was the only judge paladin of the Brilliant Shrine, and devout believers of the Holy Light would never befriend a mage who recruited undead creatures. He reckoned that Lin Li had to have deceived Rina, and thus thought that Rina would definitely stay away from Lin Li immediately after he exposed him. "Rina, you must have been deceived by him. This person is raising undead creatures in the Tower of Dusk, and his hands are stained with the blood of countless humans," Siddharth exclaimed while pulling out his magic staff and pointing it at Lin Li sternly with a sense of justice. He yelled, "How dare you enter the holy mountain of the Brilliant Shrine? Now, get ready to be purified by the holy light." However, he did not expect Rina's face to grow sullen as she flared up at him, not at Lin Li. Not only did Rina not walk away, she even stood in front of Lin Li, and scolded Siddharth, "Shut up, Felix is a guest Archbishop Martin invited." She naturally knew that Lin Li was the one who gave the Pope the antidote, but before Pope Rosario recovered fully, the matter would still have to be kept under wraps. Hence, she could only say that Lin Li was a guest invited by Archbishop Martin. Anyway, that was what a lot of people wanted to see. Seeing that Rina didn't express any repulsion or disdain towards Lin Li, and had even mentioned Archbishop Martin, Siddharth dared not clamor about purification. After all, Archbishop Martin was an archbishop just like his own teacher Domingo, yet he actually brought a heretic to the Holy Mountain. Hence, he believed that Domingo would stand on Lin Li's side. He stopped making a fuss because he could clearly feel that the magical waves coming from Lin Li seemed to be nowhere inferior to his teacher's. If he were to fight Lin Li, he would be the one doomed, especially since Rina wasn't on his side. He could be a hero, but it'd be impossible to be a martyr. Siddharth slowly put away his magic staff while keeping his guard up, and said to Rina, "Okay, since he is a guest of Archbishop Martin." He then muttered something and carefully walked past Rina, ignoring the fact that he had lied to Rina about coming to the mountain to collect herbs for Domingo. Instead, he simply left the mountain cowardly. So what if he's a guest of Archbishop Martin? Even if he's an archbishop, he can't intervene with the rules of the Court of Heresy. Siddharth thought, not wanting to let Lin Li, the damned mage, off just like that. Hence, he felt that the best solution now was to report to the Court of Heresy. Mages were seen as heretics in the first place. What more a mage who liked interacting with undead creatures? "Felix, I'm so sorry. I wanted you to see the scenery here. I didn't expect to encounter such a thing," said Rina, who knew the reason for Siddharth's appearance. Having known exactly what was going on, she wasn't afraid that the Pope and the other higher-ups would subject Lin Li to harsh treatment, and simply felt regretful because her good mood was ruined. "It's all right. When we arrived, I've already expected there to be such a misunderstanding," said Lin Li, who didn't hold it against her, nor allowed such a trivial matter to affect her mood. The Court of Heresy could be considered the only place on the entire Holy Mountain that would feel cold and spooky to others. Even though it was in the direction of sunrise, and would be shrouded in sunlight throughout the day, even the believers of Holy Light would shiver uncontrollably when they were there. Although Siddharth was a disciple of Archbishop Domingo, and had become a bishop at a young age, he would still feel his legs turning into jelly whenever he stood in the small square in front of the Court of Heresy. There had been numerous times when he felt like giving up. Ever since the establishment of the Court of Heresy more than 1,300 years ago, the demons and necromancers who had been judged never made it back outside after entering. Out of the believers, there were many bishops and even a few cardinals who had been tortured badly. There was even an archbishop who died from being tormented in there. The Court of Heresy was a terrifying existence in the eyes of not only the heretics, but also the people of the Brilliant Shrine. Of course, be it a heretic or a believer in Holy Light, they were all labeled as heretics once judged. Actually, Siddharth knew clearly that although marriage between clergymen was not prohibited in the Brilliant Shrine, it was impossible for him to have any relationship with Rina. The fact that she could become the only judge paladin meant that she had already dedicated all her life and soul to the Holy Light that she believed in, and thus it was impossible for her to accept the courtship of any mortals. Siddharth was not the only one. In fact, numerous young men who had a crush on Rina were well aware of that too. However, seeing that Rina, who was often aloof and standoffish, was walking together with a heretic and they chatted frequently, Siddharth could not help but feel extremely jealous. At the thought of Rina standing in front of Lin Li to defend him, Siddharth gritted his teeth angrily and strode towards the Court of Heresy, which looked like the mouth of a beast. "What? There's a heretic on the Holy Mountain," exclaimed the Chief Judge Ferger, who was holding on to a list of pharmaceutics problems that he was about to consult a pharmaceutics guru about. However, he didn't expect to hear such groundbreaking news from a young man wearing a bishop's robe. Ferger was rather shocked to see someone taking the initiative to visit the Court of Heresy. However, he was also astonished to hear the news. The poison in the Pope's body had just been removed, and although the Pope's power had already been restored to the sanctuary realm, there was still a great distance from his past pinnacle. If the news were to be leaked at this juncture, it would definitely not be a good thing for the Brilliant Shrine. "Yes, I'm sure that person is definitely a heretic. Although he is not a necromancer, everyone knows that he rears undead creatures," said Siddharth, who secretly rejoiced because he did not expect to run into the Judge of Heresy Ferger. He thought, that mage is dead this time. "Do you know him?" Ferger asked. He was about to send some of his subordinates to find out more, but he paused when he heard Siddharth's words, which seemed to imply that he knew the so-called heretic. No. Siddharth quickly waved his hands. If he were to be associated with a heretic, he probably wouldn't be able to save himself from the Judge of Heresy even with the help of his teacher. While denying profusely, he got a grip on himself and carefully said, "Many people know about that heretic. I don't know what method he used, but he actually managed to deceive Archbishop Martin and Judge Paladin Rina and win their trust. They're on their way to the herbal plantation on the Holy Mountain. Furger frowned slightly as he found the description of the heretic rather familiar, especially since he was associated to Archbishop Martin and Rina. He thought about it carefully, and asked Siddharth, "Who is the heretic you're referring to, and why are Martin and Rina involved? Since you've recognized him as a heretic, why didn't you do what a faithful should?" No, I was already preparing to purify the heretic, but Judge Paladin Rina defended him. I reckon that she should have been deceived. After all, that heretic is allegedly Archbishop Martin's guest, said Siddharth. He'd initially just wanted to put Lin Li behind bars in the court of heresy. However, after speaking to Furger, and realizing that he was not as terrifying as the rumors made him out to be, he decided to pull a scheming trick. He thought, if Rina got stripped off of her position as Judge Paladin, would I stand a chance with her? Martin's guest? Furger asked as he felt like he was starting to get a clearer idea. Martin did have many guests, but recently, he had only had one, and that was the pharmaceutics guru Felix from the breezy plains. He wondered, could he be the heretic that this kid is talking about? Yes, it is a mage from the breezy plains. It's said that he owns a force called the Tower of Dusk. Many people know that he has raised a lot of undead creatures, and once killed thousands of innocent people in the breezy plains. The people there compare him to the butcher Osric, said Siddharth. He had already seen some hope of success, and was just waiting to hear the chief judge's order for him to nab Lin Li. Anyone the judge of heresy deemed a heretic would be considered one. Unless the Pope himself forbade it, no one would be able to stop the killing of a heretic, not even an archbishop. Of course, Siddharth was mostly thinking about how he should get his teacher to help if Rina were to get arrested. He felt that his teacher Domingo would be able to reduce her sentence. Otherwise, if she were to be sent to the court of heresy, she would lose her title as Judge Paladin, and he would have no chance of winning her heart. However, while Siddharth was still full of fantasies and letting his imagination run wild, the chief judge Furger suddenly laughed, and said, "I was wondering who you were talking about. Turns out it's Master Felix. He's not a heretic, but a guest of Martin and Inglos's friend." How could he be a heretic? Go back, don't let your imagination run wild. Siddharth was instantly dumbfounded, and his mind was sent into a whirlwind as the voices around him gradually disappeared while he seemed to have lost his wits at this moment. Master Felix? The chief judge actually called that heretic Master Felix. Why? In the eyes of the followers of the Holy Light, even an ordinary mage is considered a heretic. Why is that mage, who's often associating with undead creatures, not considered a heretic to the chief judge? Staring at the dumbfounded Siddharth, Furger didn't think much about it. In fact, that was not an uncommon thing, because the higher-ups usually determined if one was a heretic from the perspective of interests. Siddharth, who had never seen much of the world, was making his judgment based on the doctrine. Once he rose to a certain position, he would understand how naive he was now. Okay, just leave if you have nothing else to say to me. I still have things to do, Furger said after hearing that Rina and Lin Li were at the mountain behind. He was extremely eager to ask Lin Li some questions about pharmaceutics, and could not be bothered to entertain Siddharth, whom he regarded as a joke. However, Siddharth was clueless, and he could not figure it out at all. Seeing that the chief judge Furger was about to leave, he quickly chased after him, and yelled, "Sir, that person really is a heretic. He has dirty undead creatures for servants, and he killed plenty of innocent people in the breezy plains. He deceived Archbishop Martin and Judge Paladin Rina, Siddharth's voice was getting softer and softer because he realized that the chief judge, who he tried to stop, was growing increasingly sullen. He emitted an icy cold vibe that made Siddharth shiver despite standing under the sun. Kid, I remind you again that Master Felix is not a heretic. This is the decision that I have made as the judge of heresy. I don't want to hear those words from you again. Otherwise, I won't mind locking you up in here, said Furger, who would definitely deal with Siddharth if he were to go overboard and upset Lin Li before he left, even though he saw his behavior as nothing but a joke. If you're enjoying my content, please consider donating a coffee. Or checking out my shirts on TeePublic. Damn it, it's only been a few days, and Halyard has already become a true master of pharmaceutics under Master Felix's guidance. Maybe if I seize the opportunity and push for it, I might be able to become a master too. Halyard ignored the dumbfounded Siddharth, and adjusted his expressions before scurrying towards the herbal plantation at the back of the mountain with a stiff smile on his face. Siddharth stood in front of the door for a long time before finally snapping out of his trance. However, he could not help but shiver uncontrollably when he thought of the words that the Chief Judge Furger said before leaving. At the same time, he felt incredibly puzzled because he wasn't framing Lin Li, and was simply telling the truth. Wasn't it the Judge of Heresy's duty to purify the heretics? Filled with doubts and horror, Siddharth proceeded to look for his teacher, Archbishop Domingo. The only truth in the words that he'd said to Rena earlier on was the fact that Archbishop Domingo was indeed immersed in studying pharmaceutics. Siddharth, what are you doing? I've been trying to get you to come here, and you didn't appear even after a long time. Come take a look at the potion that I've just formulated. This is a real master-level potion. Domingo exclaimed while fiddling with the potions in front of the table, completely failing to notice Siddharth's expression. Oh, yes, teacher, I went out for a while, said Siddharth, who was feeling vexed and troubled. He was hesitating and contemplating if he should ask his teacher that question. After all, everything that happened today was too peculiar. Siddharth's dejected tone attracted the attention of Archbishop Domingo. Under normal circumstances, his disciple would definitely be pleased and excited to see the potions he created. Yet, Siddharth actually did not show any signs of excitement at all, despite the fact that he had formulated a master-level potion. Siddharth, what happened? Why do you look so pale? Domingo asked in bewilderment after putting the potion down. This is the holy mountain of the Brilliant Shrine. What made Siddharth become like this? He's still my teacher, after all. Upon sight of Domingo's caring gaze, Siddharth felt a warm and fuzzy feeling in his heart, and he decided to consult his teacher. Perhaps there might be some huge conspiracy that concerns the Brilliant Shrine, he thought. At the thought of this, he tried to perk up, and aggrievedly said, Teacher, I suspect that a big conspiracy is brewing on this holy mountain. I think that it also involves some of our higher-ups. Domingo was slightly stunned. Dismayed, he said, Siddharth, I've already told you this many times, stop reading those silly myths and legends that have been made up mindlessly by others. You might as well take the time to learn more about pharmaceutics from me. No, teacher, what I said is true, Siddharth insisted frantically after seeing that his teacher was dismissing of his words. He turned around and looked out of the door to ensure that no one was eavesdropping, after which he closed the door again and returned. Trying to suppress his volume, he said, Teacher, I discovered a heretic who entered the holy mountain today. The strange thing is, when I went to the Judge of Heresy's office to report, the Chief Judge Furger didn't care to find out the truth, and simply insisted that that man was not a heretic. Why have you become like the Judge of Heresy? All you do is call others heretics, Domingo said with a look of displeasure. Although the Court of Heresy had helped the Brilliant Shrine get rid of countless enemies, they still had a horrible reputation in the Brilliant Shrine, after all. Hence, after hearing his disciple mention a heretic and going to the Court of Heresy to complain, Domingo's joy from concocting the master-level potion vanished instantly. Seeing that his teacher was a little angry, Siddharth frantically said, Teacher, it's true, that mage is called Felix. You should have heard of him. It's no secret that he has undead creatures for his servants. Everyone in the breezy plains knows about it. I saw him and Rena. Before Siddharth could even finish speaking, he saw a foreign object flying towards him, hitting his forehead before he could evade. All of a sudden, the object shattered with a loud thud, and a warm liquid flowed out slowly, exuding a medicinal scent. Archbishop Domingo was glowering with a sullen expression, and his finger was trembling continuously. He seemed to be too infuriated for words. The master-level potion that Domingo had just concocted had already vanished without a trace. How dare you call Master Felix a heretic? You actually had the nerve to complain to the Judge of Heresy. Do you still respect me as your teacher? Why didn't Ferger lock you up in the court of heresy? Domingo hollered while grabbing either a potion bottle or a piece of equipment and throwing them at Siddharth. Faced with his angry teacher, Siddharth dared not dodge at all, and all he could do was stand there and bear with the misery and horror within him. It was the second time that he heard someone call that damned heretic a master today. He thought, one of them is a mighty chief judge, and the other is my teacher. Who is that damned Felek? Isn't he just the president of a small guild of magic? Teacher, what wrong have I done? Although Siddharth didn't suffer any injuries, his robe had been stained by various potions, and he looked extremely pathetic and disheveled. Domingo finally calmed down and sighed before saying, I know what you're thinking. Since you know that he has an undead creature for a servant and know about everything that happened in the breezy plains, wouldn't you know why the Tower of Dusk developed so quickly in a short period of time? Master Felek is a real pharmaceutics guru. He's a guru. Do you know what a guru is? He came to the Brilliant Shrine this time to talk to us about pharmaceutics. Do you know how important this is to the Brilliant Shrine? Siddharth obviously couldn't hide his thoughts from Domingo. After all, Domingo was old and experienced. However, due to the fact that the detoxification of the Pope was a confidential matter, he couldn't reveal it, and had no choice but to simply say that it was something about a pharmaceutical business cooperation. Besides, a cooperation would be of great benefit to the Brilliant Shrine, and that wasn't confidential. G-Guru? He's a pharmaceutics guru. How is this possible? How old is he? Siddharth exclaimed as he couldn't believe his ears at all. That also made him realize why the higher-ups ignored the fact that Lin Li was a heretic. You have been by my side for too long, and your perspective has become too narrow because you've always been on the Holy Mountain. Previously, we built another church after some negotiations with Fallen Kingdom. Go back and make some preparations. I'll arrange for you to work there. Without hesitation, Domingo waved at Siddharth and rubbed his forehead before turning around to mess with the potions. However, Siddharth felt shocked again even though he had just snapped back to reality. As a bishop, it would definitely be a good thing to work at a church, but that would depend on the location too. If it were in a place that was within control of the Brilliant Shrine, a bishop's position would definitely be higher than that of a castellan. However, Fallen Kingdom was a country of magic, and the clergymen of the Brilliant Shrine were insignificant there. Siddharth suddenly thought of something. There was allegedly a bishop named Raleigh who had been sent to Alana, the capital of the Fallen Kingdom. The unlucky Raleigh preached for more than 20 years, yet he only had less than 10 followers. That probably felt worse than death. Although the Fallen Kingdom was very prosperous, it wasn't so for the people of the Brilliant Shrine, because faith was scarce there. Teacher, I don't want to leave your side. At the thought of the agonizing days that would await him once he went to Fallen Kingdom, Siddharth teared up and leaped towards Domingo, hugging his thigh and bawling loudly. Bishop Domingo had already made a decision, and thus wouldn't change it just because Siddharth was crying. His disciple wasn't his son, after all. On the same day, he looked for the person in charge before informing Siddharth to pack his things and get ready to leave. At the same time, the incident also reminded several higher-ups to immediately release the news of the pharmaceutical business cooperation with the Tower of Dusk so as to finally provide an acceptable explanation for the fact that Lin was respected by the higher-ups. In fact, Lin Li didn't even care about what Siddharth said, and he even forgot his name the next day. He had no idea that the young and promising bishop was exiled to the Fallen Kingdom for calling Lin Li a heretic. Apart from giving pointers to a few pharmaceutic enthusiasts, Lin Li mainly focused on the Light Bible of the Brilliant Shrine. As for the cooperation, he would send his corresponding subordinates to see to the details. The Light Bible was the foundation of the Brilliant Shrine, and it was an important book for the interpretation of the power of light. Even a prodigy might not be able to reap benefits and gain knowledge just after a few days of reading. However, it was different for Lin Li, who had obtained the debris of the stars, holy light, a long time ago. Ever since then, he never stopped researching holy light. Hence, to him, reading the Light Bible was mainly just for filling in the gaps in his knowledge and gaining a better understanding of holy light. However, Lin Li didn't know that there would often be several pairs of eyes watching him secretly. However, as time passed, those eyes were filled with doubt and disappointment because when Lin Li was reading the Light Bible, he never once showed any aura of the power of light. After a few more days, Lin Li knew that he could not procrastinate any longer. Although the priest of the Darkness Shrine, Jiker, did not mention exactly what the matter was, Lin Li knew that it was definitely important since Sendros had said so. Moreover, although Lin Li had yet to finish reading the entire Light Bible, he had already gained plenty of knowledge from it. Even though Lin Li did not have any experience with it in real combat, he could also feel that there was great improvement from before. That was precisely the reason Lin Li could not help but recall the Book of Darkness from the Darkness Shrine. Hence, Lin Li could not give up Sendros' invitation no matter what. He believed that if he really had an opportunity to read the Book of Darkness and perfect his understanding of Gloomy Dark's power, he would definitely see an increase in the power of his light and darkness domain, and he might just reach level 24. After Lin Li revealed his intention to leave, the higher-ups of the Brilliant Shrine, who were also pharmaceutical enthusiasts, immediately panicked, and began to bombard him with plenty of questions about pharmaceutics. They were trying to seize every second left. Higher-ups like them definitely wouldn't leave the Holy Mountain easily. Hence, it would be troublesome for them to go to the Tower of Dusk to ask Lin Li for advice again. Tolan City was located on the border of the Leaden Kingdom. Originally a military base, it had become rather prosperous with the high influx of caravans during the times of peace. It had already become a medium-sized city. Bright early in the morning, the city gate of Tolan City opened. The city guards armed with spears were standing on each side of the city gate, waiting to inspect the passing caravans. Perhaps because there had been peace for too long, the people of the Dwarf Kingdom had never had much ambition, and there was barely any friction either. The guards were all sluggish, and most of them were dozing off while holding onto spears. There was a large caravan that was approaching the Dwarf Kingdom slowly on the avenue rather far away. The 10-odd carriages were full, but they were covered by a cloth, hence it was unknown what goods they were carrying. Actually, such caravans were common in Tolan City. The most eye-catching part of this one was the members of the caravan. Apart from the 200 mercenaries of various professions, there were also more than 20 mages. In fact, it was not a big deal for there to be more than 20 mages in the caravan. However, if someone were to take a closer look, they would find out that the mages were all at least archmages, and even if they were to encounter any thieves or bandits, they would definitely be able to defeat them. Captain, whom does this caravan belong to? The Glitter Gold Trade Union wouldn't be so arrogant. It had better not be a hoax to intimidate us, said one of the city guards who noticed that the caravan was approaching. Those are not for intimidating others. I heard that that caravan belongs to a force from the breezy plains, called the Tower of Dusk, said one of the city guards. Breezy plains? That seems to be very far away from us. Where is the Tower of Dusk? I heard that the most arrogant ones from that place are the bandits called Dark Blade. I've never heard of the Tower of Dusk, the city guard said while carefully observing the caravan in front of him. As a citizen of the Leaden Kingdom, he didn't have much respect for mages. In fact, it was just like how people of the Felon Kingdom didn't respect clergymen. Who cares? As long as the caravan is not from the Brilliant Shrine, we'll call the shots here. Check them, said the city guard, who then walked towards the mage who was clearly the leader of the caravan. Watching as their captain walked over, the other city guards pursed their lips in envy, and walked towards the carriage behind the caravan, preparing to inspect the cargo inside the carriage. However, before they could even do so, they received orders to let the caravan pass. Still, no one found it strange at all, because those things happened every single day, and after the caravan entered the city, they would be able to obtain the benefits they deserved from the captain. Gold coins? This Tower of Dusk is really interesting. Everyone didn't know how much the captain had got, but they received 5 gold coins each, which was enough to make them feel satisfied. After all, their monthly salary was only 10 gold coins. The Tower of Dusk's caravan entered Tolan City, and stopped in front of the largest hotel. In cities along borders, there would be countless caravans passing by. Hence, there were plenty of hotels in the city, and most of them often contained extremely spacious yards for the guests to park their carriages. The caravan of the Tower of Dusk was led by Archmage Gavin. Due to the fact that his strength had already reached the peak of level 19, he had an understanding of the legendary realm. At this stage, there was no point in learning anymore, so he handed the matters over to the Tower of Dusk and took the trip as training. However, at present, Gavin's goal of training and gaining experience seemed to be difficult to achieve. With the current power of the escort, no one would be willing to waste their efforts on a caravan like that. There were more than 200 mercenaries, but they were all just like coolies who were sent by the forces that surrendered to the Tower of Dusk. However, the 20 archmages were all well equipped, and even an ordinary powerhouse of the legendary realm would never dare to provoke them. After arranging everything for the caravan, Gavin turned down his companion's invitation, and instead sat alone in his room to read some books about magic. He carefully tried to experience the enlightenment of the legendary realm. In the past, he'd even had the idea to give up on studying magic, thinking that being an archmage was his limit. Instead, he turned his attention to pursuing authority. However, he now realized that the legendary realm wasn't completely out of his reach, and that his desire for power in the past was way too ridiculous. The legendary realm was something that he dared not think about prior to this, and yet the young mage Lin Li had actually managed to discover the mystery of the legendary realm within just 2 years. At the thought of everything he'd experienced in the past 2 years, Gavin felt rather emotional. The darkness gradually shrouded the city of Tolan, which had fallen silent. There were no noises at all, except at the hotels that were still open for business. There would occasionally be some sounds of laughter and angry cussing. In the largest hotel in Tolan City, the oil lamps that lit up the windows went out one after another, and the people who had been getting busy for an entire day began to rest. However, at this moment, there were neat footsteps shuffling on both sides of the wide street outside the hotel, followed by the appearance of rows of soldiers, who soon surrounded the hotel under the command of an officer. A few of them stepped forth and knocked on the door, and the sounds of their knocking became extremely ear-piercing in the quiet night. Gavin closed the book of magic and dimmed the magic lamp on the table. Just as he was about to begin meditating, he heard a loud noise from outside, followed by the sounds of footsteps shuffling. "Sir, have you gotten enough rest? Hurry and come here. There are soldiers in the yard who want to check and seal our cargo," said an anxious Helsinki, who was in charge of guarding the goods at night. Gavin couldn't help but frown. This time, they were transporting 15 magical crystal cannons that Lin Li had requested. Such powerful long-range assault weapons were generally banned in all nations, but no one raised any objections now that it was a time of peace. Besides, the Tower of Dusk had already sent crystal cannons using this route more than once, yet the city guard of Tolan City actually only came to seize their goods now all of a sudden, which was rather confusing. Of course, regardless of the reason, Gavin wouldn't really allow the soldiers to take the magical crystal cannons away. After all, each crystal cannon cost hundreds of thousands of gold coins, and 15 of them would cost nearly 10 million gold coins. The Tower of Dusk was not going to waste their money even if they were wealthy. It's time those guys got to work, Gavin thought. Gavin picked up his staff and went to the backyard of the hotel with Helsinki, who led the way. At this moment, the yard was already brightly lit. The city guard and the mercenaries guarding the goods were facing each other, seemingly about to get into a fight anytime soon. Given the power of the Tower of Dusk, they definitely wouldn't be intimidated by the insignificant city guards. Even if there were only those 200 mercenaries and no mages, they would definitely be able to break through the guards who were surrounding them. However, everyone knew that they couldn't get physical, because their goods would definitely be confiscated, and they would probably never be able to take that route again. After all, the guards were representing the Leaden Kingdom. Besides, they all knew that the real owner of Leaden Kingdom was not a royal family, but the Brilliant Shrine. "I received a report that there are prohibited goods in your caravan's cargo. Please lay down your weapons for inspection," one of the officers of the city guards said haughtily. At this moment, Gavin also walked towards them, and he pulled out a certificate before saying to the officer, "Sir, this is a pass that has been personally signed by Count Andre. It's a permit for our caravan to skip the checks in the Leaden Kingdom. Would you like to take a look?" Although Leaden Kingdom was a religious country, everyone had desires, what more clergymen who were officials and nobles. They all wanted to become bishops, not solely because they wanted to preach the religion. Since a long time ago, the Tower of Dusk had already spent plenty of gold coins to bribe the security personnel who were in charge of the inspections to clear the route. Tolan City was ruled by Count Andre of the Leaden Kingdom, hence, the most effective pass would be one signed by him. Although they had the permit, the Tower of Dusk did not use it often, and would usually just bribe the guards with some gold coins. After all, they would still have to obey the unspoken rules. Anyway, they didn't have to spend much this way, either. However, Gavin could tell that the guards were obviously out to create trouble. It was something that could not be settled easily with money. Hence, he didn't say much after seeing the situation, and simply handed over the permit that Duke Andre had signed personally. "Oh?" The officer grabbed the document in Gavin's hands, and seemed to have originally intended to read it under the light of the torch, but when he moved the torch closer, he burned it instead. The pass was made of paper, so it immediately turned into ashes, because it wasn't a magical item. "Oh, I'm sorry, I was too careless," he said, clearly not apologetic at all. Instead, he seemed rather smug and proud of himself. He glanced at Gavin, and said, "Are you the leader of this caravan? Someone reported that your goods contain prohibited item. Please get your people to put their weapons down for inspection." Even a fool could tell that it was definitely not a careless mistake. The fact that he even dared to burn Duke Andre's permit showed that he was definitely a big shot. Gavin began to feel a little worried too. After all, he was not in his own territory. Although the development of the Tower of Dusk was already rapid and intrepid, they couldn't compare to a strong nation. What? Magical crystal cannons? The Tower of Dusk is really wealthy, exclaimed General Clark, who was the commander of the Northwest Legion of the Leaden Kingdom. He couldn't believe his ears when he'd heard the news from his subordinates. 15 magical crystals were worth a total of nearly 10 million gold coins. Most importantly, if it were just ordinary goods, he wouldn't be able to do anything to them other than create trouble for the group. However, it was different for magical crystal cannons, because they were prohibited weapons. "General, what should we do about these people?" said the officer, who was the same one who burned Gavin's pass. Obviously, he was not a city guard of Tolan City. "What else is there to do?" "Detain them. I shall see how capable they are. How dare they disregard me?" General Clark tried to stop himself from feeling smug as he spoke coldly to his subordinate. Actually, while those magical crystal cannons might be expensive, they would only be valuable if there was demand for them. If no one wanted them, they would be nothing but a pile of scrap iron. The 15 magical crystal cannons were worth nearly 10 million gold coins, but if Clark were to really confiscate them, he probably wouldn't be able to sell a single one. The high price of the magical crystal cannons was one aspect, but more importantly, the number of magical crystals required to use them was simply not affordable for ordinary people. Pure mana was required for the magical crystal cannons, and that kind of mana could only be supplied by magical crystals. Besides, it couldn't be an ordinary magical crystal. Even a level 15 magical crystal would only last for 10 shots. Even if one could afford it, they might not be able to use it. Apart from Lin Li, who had excavated various treasure ruins and gained a massive amount of wealth, no one else could afford to supply the magical crystal cannons with mana. The Dwarf Kingdom could produce magical crystal cannons for their own use, but so far, there were only 18 magical crystal cannons on their city walls. Besides, it was said that the kings of the Dwarf Kingdom were all been banned from using the cannons unless they were on the verge of death and faced with formidable enemies. Of course, Clark was not a thief, and he didn't want to confiscate those goods to sell them. Hence, it didn't matter how valuable they were. The most important thing was how valuable they were to the Tower of Dusk. Clark had just been transferred to the Northwest Legion as a general, being responsible for the defense of the northwest of the Leaden Kingdom. Hence, it was not an exaggeration to say that the entire northwestern region was his territory. Shortly after he rose to the position, his subordinates reported to him that the caravan of the Tower of Dusk was delivering a lot of important goods to the relevant nobles and officials. However, he was not included. In fact, Clark did not really care about that small amount of money, and he merely thought of them as a caravan from a foreign force. However, it was a matter of pride to him because he was the only one who was excluded from the list of officials who were supposed to receive gifts. That would only reflect badly on him. Of course, after discovering that the confiscated goods were actually 15 magical crystal cannons, Clark also knew that the gifts that the other officials were receiving were also exorbitant. That made him find it difficult to suppress his anger. As a general, he had never heard of the Tower of Dusk before. Even the members of the Supreme Council, with the exception of the powerhouses of the Sanctuary Realm, would have to follow his rules. But, General, Duke Andre seems to be very close to this Tower of Dusk. After all, he is the cousin of His Majesty. Although the young officer was very courageous and brave, he could not help but be worried that Clark wouldn't defend him. After all, without Clark, he was just a small officer who would be insignificant to Clark. Andre? He's a royal and a believer of the Holy Light, and yet he colluded with heretics to smuggle prohibited weapons? Would he dare to come forth? Although Clark was only a viscount, he was also an army commander and general, and was really not afraid of Andre, who was only respected because of his title. On the holy mountain of the Brilliant Shrine, Lin Li did not read the Light Bible. Instead, he was explaining some pharmaceutical problems to the higher-ups of the Brilliant Shrine in a pharmaceutical lab. Master Felix, regarding the technique you mentioned yesterday, I practiced it continuously when I went back, but I still can't meet the minimum requirements in terms of speed. Do you have any special tricks or technique for that? Asked Ferger, who now seemed just like an elementary school student as he stared at Lin Li sincerely. Lin Li seemed to have also gotten into the zone as he said sternly like a strict teacher, "Speed? You're trying to formulate potions, not perform acrobatics. Rhythm is what you need, do you understand? The heating duration for various herbs and the timing for specific actions are all a kind of rhythm. What is speed? If you're looking to be fast, you might as well cook all the herbs in one pot." However, after being harshly reprimanded by Lin Li, Ferger was not at all infuriated. Instead, he was overjoyed. The people beside Ferger, such as Archbishop Domingo and Head Halyard, surprisingly did not make fun of Ferger. Instead, they focused on noting down everything that Lin Li said in their own journals. It couldn't be helped. Lin Li was a pharmaceutics guru, and anyone could tell that Lin Li was already prepared to leave. Hence, it might just be their last lesson. If they wanted to ask him any more questions in the future, they would have to look for him at the Tower of Dusk. For ordinary people, that wouldn't be an issue. However, they were big shots of the Brilliant Shrine. And any slight movement of theirs would involve various other issues. Hence, they couldn't just go anywhere they wanted. However, just as everyone was lamenting about time passing too quickly, a pastor arrived and fearfully said, "Master Felix, there's someone outside asking to see you. He claims to be Gavin from the Tower of Dusk, and says that there's something important that he'd like to see you for." Hearing this, the senior executives' faces grew sullen. Since someone from the Tower of Dusk had arrived, it was clear that it was time for their pharmaceutics lesson to end. Lin Li found it bizarre as well. After all, Gavin had been responsible for most of the affairs of the Tower of Dusk, and he also had the power to make most decisions. Even if something major had happened, Gavin probably would have just sent someone over to relay the message while he tended to the Tower of Dusk. "Yeah, I know, you don't need to bring him here. I'll just go look for him," said Lin Li, who then headed to the foot of the holy mountain by himself without waiting for Gavin to be brought there in order to save time. "Wait a minute, Master Felix, I'll go with you. I have a question, and I'd like to ask you for guidance," Halyard interjected as he frantically scurried over to chase after Lin Li. Clearly, no matter what the issue was, Lin Li was going to leave anyway. Otherwise, he could have just made Gavin to come upstairs and report the situation to him. Lin Li did not refuse. Anyway, he could not fly on the holy mountain, and walking wouldn't take up much of his time anyway. Even if the higher-ups of the Brilliant Shrine had no issues, they had all improved greatly in the past few days under his guidance. At this moment, it was necessary for one of them to see him off. Since everyone knew that he was cooperating with the Brilliant Shrine, they wouldn't arouse any suspicion. Yet, after they made it to the foot of the mountain, everyone got a great shock. Although they had long heard about the pharmaceutical business cooperation between the Brilliant Shrine and the Tower of Dusk, the scene was a bit too flabbergasting. Lin Li was walking in front, while Halyard, the head of the Holy Paladins, was following him and asking him some questions eagerly. Ferger was walking behind them together with the other big shots of the Brilliant Shrine, such as Archbishop Unlos, Archbishop Domingo, and Cardinal Jefferson. At the foot of the Holy Mountain, Gavin was pacing back and forth anxiously, and when he suddenly heard a greeting coming from afar, he quickly turned his head to look at the staircase of the Holy Mountain. Gavin thought that he understood Lin Li very well. After all, Archbishop Martin was the one who personally invited Lin Li to the Brilliant Shrine when he visited the Tower of Dusk. However, he still couldn't believe his eyes. There were a few elders surrounding Lin Li while he was making his way down the mountain. They were all archbishops and cardinals, staring at Lin Li with respect and awe. Since the president is respected so greatly by the Brilliant Shrine, the matter about the caravan should be rather easy to solve. At the thought of this, the anxiety within Gavin finally faded, and he frantically walked towards Lin Li and the rest. "Gavin, did something happen at the Tower of Dusk?" Lin Li asked in puzzlement. Gavin lowered his head and greeted him before explaining with an apologetic expression, "President, the caravan that I was in charge of bringing to the Dwarf Kingdom to purchase some magical crystal cannons." After hearing Gavin's brief explanation, there wasn't much of a change in expression on Lin Li's face. However, the higher-ups of the Brilliant Shrine began to frown. Lin Li had given the Pope an antidote for Viper's poison, and although it was just fulfilling an agreement that they had made previously, it was still no exaggeration to say that Lin Li was the benefactor of the Brilliant Shrine. Besides, he was a genuine pharmaceutics guru who might even be the legendary son of the Holy Light. The caravan of the Tower of Dusk was now being detained on a site belonging to the Brilliant Shrine. Wouldn't that be a disgrace to the Brilliant Shrine? "No hurry, let's go. Take me to see General Clark," Lin Li said to Gavin without blaming or reprimanding him. Although Gavin was one of the authoritative figures of the Tower of Dusk, the people in the Leaden Kingdom had probably never even heard of the Tower of Dusk. Hence, they definitely wouldn't be bothered to take Gavin seriously. However, Lin Li was different. Even without the Tower of Dusk, he was still a legendary powerhouse no one dared to take lightly. Hence, while the matter was indeed hard to handle for Gavin, it was nothing for Lin Li. "Archbishop Unlos, Archbishop Domingo," Lin Li turned around with a faint smile to the big shots of the Brilliant Shrine, and continued, "I'm sorry, but our caravan encountered some issues that I have to deal with. I have to go and handle it. I hereby bid you goodbye. You're all welcome to visit the Tower of Dusk anytime you'd like." Seeing that Lin Li was about to leave, the higher-ups of the Brilliant Shrine were starting to get a little anxious. Although the matter seemed to be rather trivial to them, they still couldn't stop Lin Li from settling his own matters for the sake of clearing their doubts and answering their questions. Besides, the matter happened in their territory, and while it would be all right if they didn't know about it, now that they had heard it, they couldn't just keep mum. "Wait a minute, Master Felix, I still have a few questions for you. If you don't mind, may I consult you about it while you're on your way there?" asked Halyard, the leader of the Holy Paladins. He was initially only an intermediate pharmacist, but under the guidance of Lin Li in the past few days, he already became an advanced pharmacist. In fact, he was almost a master-level pharmacist according to the current standards in Amrel. He was well aware of how important Lin Li's guidance was to him, hence, he definitely wouldn't want to waste any opportunity. Of course, another reason was that he wanted to go with Lin Li to see who the person who was ruining his learning opportunity was. There were many others who shared the same thoughts as Halyard, But it was obviously impossible for the entire group of higher-ups of the Brilliant Shrine to tag along. Immediately after Halyard spoke, Archbishop Domingo decided that he, too, wanted to consult Lin Li along the journey. As for Los and the rest, they had no choice but to glower at the two of them who were quick to act, and bid Lin Li goodbye helplessly. Although the 15 magical crystal cannons that had been detained were worth nearly 10 million gold coins, Lin Li did not immediately fly there to settle scores with Clark. Magical crystal cannons were indeed expensive, but there wasn't much demand for them anyway. Hence, he needed not worry about Clark selling them away. Hence, the four of them left Delano, City of Dawn, and headed towards Sparta, the capital of the Leaden Kingdom, in a luxurious carriage that was stamped with the Brilliant Shrine's badge. Although General Clark was the commander of the Northwest Legion, it was now a time of peace, hence, he didn't stay in the base. Instead, he returned to Sparta right after dealing with the Legion's affairs. The fact that he detained the caravans and goods of the Tower of Dusk had also spread like wildfire, and caused an uproar amongst the aristocrats of Sparta City. In fact, many people were clueless about how significant the Tower of Dusk was in the breezy plains. The only thing that caught their eye was the identity of the two parties involved in the conflict. One of them was General Clark, the commander of the Northwest Legion, while the other was Count André, a traditional noble who owned a large region in the northwest of the Leaden Kingdom. He was considered a powerful figure of status in the Leaden Kingdom. At this juncture, the focus of the dispute between the two parties was no longer the caravan of the Tower of Dusk, but had vaguely become a battle between a traditional noble and a rising one. Neither of them had expected it all. Otherwise, they wouldn't have intervened in the first place and ended up at a point of no return. Others would usually try to solve the issue as far as possible, but the two of them were simply stirring trouble and blowing things out of proportion. Lin Li and the other higher-ups of the Brilliant Shrine did not expect such a trivial matter to become the spark that ignited trouble and caused a huge conflict between the big shots of the new and old forces of the Leaden Kingdom. At this moment, Lin Li and his companions were actually seated in a luxurious carriage and discussing the various pharmaceutical problems while slowly moving towards Sparta, where the conflict arose. Delano, the City of Dawn, was rather near Sparta, and even though they traveled slowly on the carriage, it only took them half a day to reach the gate of Sparta. The city guards in front of the gate dared not stop them, because they saw the Brilliant Shrine's badge on the carriage. Instead, they even saluted them piously when the carriage passed. They were even more respectful to the Brilliant Shrine than they were to the king. Under the guidance of Gavin, the carriage moved straight into Count André's mansion, and stopped slowly in front of the gate. The guard at the gate had already seen the badge on the carriage from afar. Hence, he had long sent someone to report to the people inside, and when the carriage pulled over slowly, the people from the mansion had already come out. "Where has that kid André gone?" Halyard questioned when he alighted from the carriage. He noticed the guards at the gate, but he didn't see Count André around. Hence, his face grew sullen immediately. "Sir Halyard, my father has gone out because he has some matters to handle. If you have any instructions for me, please wait in there for a moment." "I'll send someone to inform my father to come home immediately," said Nesta, the eldest son of Count André. Although he did not panic when answering Halyard, he was feeling anxious deep down as he continuously wondered about the Halyard's purpose of visit. All of a sudden, the steward beside Nesta quietly tugged at his sleeves and shot a glance at him, hinting for him to pay attention to the middle-aged mage who was the first to get off the carriage. Nesta was still feeling a little puzzled, but upon closer inspection, he finally recognized him. "Isn't that Mage Gavin from the Tower of Dusk who sent hefty gifts back then?" Nesta glanced at Mage Gavin from the Tower of Dusk before looking at Halyard, who was the head of the Holy Paladins. Although Nesta was a calm and composed person, he still couldn't suppress his shock at this moment. As his father's successor, he definitely knew what his father had been feeling troubled about lately. However, he did not expect the people from the Tower of Dusk to bring Halyard along. However, before Nesta could even process everything and recover from the shock, he was greeted with another sight that made his eyeballs almost fall out. He saw an extremely young mage making his way out of the carriage with Domingo of the Brilliant Shrine. He was in utter disbelief, because Archbishop Domingo, who was second only to the Pope, not only did not show any arrogance, but even spoke to Lin Li with respect and humility. Actually, Nesta didn't need anyone to introduce him, because he could already guess that the young mage beside Archbishop Domingo was probably the founder of the legendary Tower of Dusk. Honestly, Nesta and his father Andre both had great complaints about the Tower of Dusk, but upon sight of Lin Li, Nesta felt overjoyed and astonished. Although Nesta was a great noble in the Leaden Kingdom, the higher-ups of the brilliant shrine were like gods to him. If he were to get acquainted with the Archbishop and the head of Holy Paladins of the brilliant shrine, he would definitely enjoy a boost in status in the Leaden Kingdom. By then, probably even the king wouldn't dare to belittle them. Subsequently, Nesta's guess was verified when Gavin introduced Lin Li. After knowing that the young mage who had a special relationship with Archbishop Domingo was President Felic of the Tower of Dusk, he quickly and respectfully said to them, "Archbishop Domingo, Sir Halyard, President Felic, please wait inside. My father went to see General Clark. I'll send someone to bring him back." However, after hearing Nesta's words, Lin Li stopped abruptly and smiled at the puzzled Nesta. "In this case, let's just go over. I'd like to meet General Clark too." Upon arriving at General Clark's mansion, Lin Li, Domingo, and the rest alighted from the carriage whilst still discussing pharmaceutics. Before the guards at the entrance even reported their arrival, they simply entered. However, none of the guards dared to step forward to stop them. They had no choice but to watch as they slowly walked in. Gavin led Lin Li and the rest toward the guest hall, whose door was left wide open. Soon, they heard the sounds of an argument. Although there was no foul language involved, the argument was obviously heated, and there were a few guards waiting outside the reception hall. Upon sight of Lin Li and the rest, someone immediately wanted to go in to report. However, he was stopped by Lin Li, who was answering Domingo's question. Although those guards had never seen Domingo and Halyard before, they could tell from their overbearing airs and the holy aura that was emanating from their bodies that the two of them were definitely genuine higher-ups of the brilliant shrine. Hence, they had no choice but to stay put according to Lin Li's instructions. Lin Li and the rest headed straight to the guest hall, and stopped in their tracks to look at the two who were arguing in an agitated manner. However, Lin Li was still explaining to Domingo and Halyard. Perhaps because there was no one else present in the guest hall, the two who were arguing were no longer as poised as the nobles that they were. They refused to give in at all, and yet none of them discovered that Lin Li and the rest were all standing by the entrance. "Count Andre, the Tower of Dusk has already violated the laws of the Leaden Kingdom by smuggling prohibited weapons. As a noble, you actually betrayed the kingdom's interests for a small profit. I feel really ashamed," General Clark exclaimed in anguish. It was as if he weren't speaking to a noble who was of equal status, but an incompetent subordinate. "Clark, don't try to suppress me with those rules. You're just upset because the Tower of Dusk forgot to give you a present. Must you be such a money grubber? Will a few magical crystal cannons harm the interests of the kingdom? What a joke. If it's really for the Felon Kingdom, the interests of Felon Kingdom would be harmed instead." Count Andre clearly wasn't bothered by Clark's accusations. Even if they could afford magical crystal cannons, they could not use them. If the Felon Kingdom starts purchasing magical crystal cannons in bulk, it will not only not enhance the strength of the country, but also cause plenty of the military funds to be spent in vain. Clark's face turned pale for a while. Although he knew that what Andre said was true, the problem was that he couldn't turn back now. It was more than a matter of his own pride because it concerned the pride of the entire group of rising nobles. If he were to give in and admit defeat in the end, his peers would definitely not spare him easily. Hence, he had no choice but to bite the bullet and say, "Everything I do is in accordance with the kingdom's laws and regulations. I can forgive you for accusing me, but I can't allow you to defile the sacred laws. No matter how perfect the laws and regulations are, it is impossible to achieve absolute justice. Everything has to be based on facts. Although the magical crystal cannons that are being transported by the Tower of Dusk's caravan do fit the category of prohibited weapons, it does not cause any damage to the kingdom's interests. On the contrary, these goods will bring us a significant amount of tax revenue if we allow them to pass through our customs. You're the one who's damaging the interests of the kingdom. I've already invited Duke Wilson and Duke Jean here. I shall see how you explain it to them, Andre said sneeringly. The two dukes he mentioned were the ones in charge of the kingdom's business and taxes. They could definitely accuse Clark for harming the kingdom's corporate credit and reputation. You're just being tyrannical and making an unreasonable argument. It's just, Clark clearly wouldn't admit defeat easily. He has a backer, but so do I. He thought as he tried to get a grip on his emotions. He then said with a sullen expression, "Oh, it so happens that I've also reported this to Marshal Benjamin. By then, we'll see who's right." Upon hearing that Clark had already invited the first marshal of the kingdom, Andre could no longer stay calm. Although Marshal Benjamin didn't have a high status, he was in charge of all the armies in the kingdom. He was also the most important and powerful authoritative figure in the entire kingdom. Usually, a powerful marshal like him who held great authority and political power was highly feared by the king. There would be countless suspicions about him, and they usually wouldn't end up in a good state. However, King Sinelli of the Leaden Kingdom trusted him greatly. In fact, he trusted Marshal Benjamin more than he trusted the other members of the royal family. Clearly, there was no dominant party when it came to having backers. Actually, Count Andre seemed to be slightly inferior. However, he definitely wouldn't concede defeat. The reason was the same as General Clark's. If the matter were to go awry, he definitely wouldn't be able to gain a foothold in the aristocratic circle again. General Clark, now that we're on the topic of harming the kingdom's interests, I wonder if the scumbags who have deducted the military pay and resold military supplies are considered culprits of damaging the interests of the kingdom, said Andre, who refused to give in. You. Humph. Does a highly mighty count like you know how to make such groundless statements too? Well, I do have some information, but I don't know if you'd like to listen to it, General Clark sneered. The two big figures who held authoritative positions in Leaden Kingdom completely didn't care about their own image anymore at this moment. They were constantly exposing each other's dirty secrets after digressing from the topic of the Tower of Dusk's caravan. They then accused each other of abusing their respective authority to sell military supplies and sentence others to death. Although the two of them were exposing each other's dirty deeds, the so-called scandals wouldn't really affect them, because they were powerful figures of the Leaden Kingdom. In fact, just because no one mentioned it beforehand, it didn't mean that no one else would know about it. Usually, one would be able to guess what the other party was like after thinking about the things that they had done. However, Lin Li was talking to Domingo and Halyard in front of the guest hall. As he heard their words, his face grew increasingly sullen. In the Leaden Kingdom, not everyone was a follower of Holy Light, but the aristocrats definitely believed in Holy Light because that was a basic requirement for them to get that status. Otherwise, no matter how much credit they got, it would be impossible for them to obtain a noble title. However, the mere fact that a person claimed to be a follower and could even recite and memorize the doctrine of the Holy Light did not mean that a person was a devout believer. Saying one thing and meaning another was what humans were best at. Even the clergymen of the Brilliant Shrine did not act in accordance to the doctrine of the Holy Light, let alone ordinary people who claimed to believe in the doctrine. Although Domingo and Halyard were both aware of the matter since they had all passed the age of being naive, the problem was that they still had by their side Lin Li, the president of the Guild of Magic from the Felon Kingdom. Exposing each other's dirty deeds would be the same as washing one's dirty underwear in public. That was an absolute shame and disgrace to the two big shots of the Brilliant Shrine. Finally, with a heavy humph, Halyard closed his notebook and strode into the guest hall domineeringly with a sullen expression. Lin Li and Domingo didn't bother looking up at all. Instead, they were still whispering amongst themselves about pharmaceutical knowledge when they were at the door. Halyard's body blocked the sunlight, stopping it from shining through the windows of the guest hall. At this moment, Clark and Andre, who were still arguing, finally discovered that someone was entering. "Who is that?" "Sir Halyard." Clark and Andre stopped arguing with each other and instead exclaimed in unison while staring at the person who entered. As the higher authorities of the Leaden Kingdom, they obviously knew who Halyard was. However, they could not help but blush at the thought of the argument that they just had, regardless of how thick-skinned they might be. "You call yourselves nobles? Look at the way that you're behaving," Halyard hollered in exasperation. When he heard their argument, he simply felt that the air here was extremely polluted. Of course, he didn't forget his purpose of visit, hence, he could not be bothered to make any comments about their character. Instead, he said to Clark, "Clark, did your people detain the Tower of Dusk's caravan and goods? I want you to release them immediately." "What? What?" Halyard's words caused interesting expressions to appear on Andre's and Clark's face. Andre was secretly rejoicing as well. He had never expected the Tower of Dusk to have forged ties with Halyard. He was a significant figure who was an authority in the aristocratic circle. Even Marshal Benjamin would have to treat him with due respect. Clark was in utter dismay. Regardless of what the outcome might be, even if he were to win, the Brilliant Shrine would definitely detest him after this. However, if he were to admit defeat, he would become a common enemy of both parties. Besides, offending the Brilliant Shrine and losing the protection of his superior would cause him to die a horrible death if they were to label him as a heretic. Clark knew that he really couldn't retreat anymore. It was no longer a matter of pride, but a gamble for his life. He tried to suppress the horror within him and looked at Halyard with glistening eyes. "Sir, I'm very sorry. I'd definitely do my best to serve you if it was for another matter. This time, however, the matter concerns the interests of the kingdom, and I can't agree." Andre was a little dumbfounded. Since when had Clark gotten such a strong backbone? He actually dared to defy Halyard from the Brilliant Shrine. Although there were nobles and royals in the Leaden Kingdom, the Brilliant Shrine was the real ruler. Although, strictly speaking, Halyard didn't have the rights to intervene with the matters of the kingdom. Because he was just the leader of the Holy Paladins, Halyard was still a powerful authoritative figure who was not inferior to the 4 bishops. Even Halyard felt rather surprised for a while. Such things rarely happened, and he felt shock at being rejected. Although Clark's tone wasn't assertive or aggressive, it was indeed a rejection. Halyard's face grew sullen. Felix was right outside, and Halyard hadn't expected to be turned down, because he thought it was a problem that could be solved easily. Since it's an affair of the kingdom, Halyard indeed has no say. "General Clark, I wonder if my words would be of any significance," said Domingo, who entered the room in a pure white robe which seemed to have lit up the entire room. Of course, the mages Lin Li and Gavin entered the room together with Archbishop Domingo. However, Andre and Clark only knew Gavin, who had dealt with them in the past, and had never seen Lin Li, the real master of the Tower of Dusk, before. "This? Archbishop Domingo, how are you?" Looking at Gavin, who was behind Domingo, Clark knew that Archbishop Domingo obviously came to speak for the Tower of Dusk. However, the question was, what in the world did the Tower of Dusk actually do to make the Archbishop and the leader of the Holy Paladins stand up for them? I could use Halyard's position as an excuse to turn him down, but that Archbishop is someone who has the right to discuss and make decisions with the king. What excuse can I give? Clark was horrified and resentful. Had he known earlier that the Tower of Dusk had ties with the Brilliant Shrine, he wouldn't have made such a big hoo-ha, despite knowing that the Tower of Dusk didn't bring him any gifts. Even if they had made him give them gifts instead, he would have been willing to do so. He could no longer rely on Marshal Benjamin now. Even the king would have to salute the Archbishop respectfully. No matter how authoritative Marshal Benjamin was, he wasn't more powerful than the king. Clark finally realized that there was no point in being stubborn and insisting, since the Archbishop had already come to stand up for the Tower of Dusk. He felt that he ought not to blame himself too much too. It was not that he didn't work hard enough, but it was because the enemies were too strong. "General Clark, I don't know if I can request you to release the Tower of Dusk's caravan." Domingo stared at General Clark coldly. It was a rare opportunity for him to receive pharmaceutical tips from a pharmaceutics guru, and yet it was ruined by that bastard Clark. Even though he was already old, he was still full of resentment. Thank you for watching Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share and subscribe. Have a great day.